In this video, we're going to take a look at how to find what a point is in 3D space on a curve, called evaluating a curve. First, let's create a curve. Alright, so now on this curve, we can evaluate and find out what the point is at a specific location. The thing, though, is that this curve has a domain. So how we specify this is a value, a parameter usually called t, that goes along this curve all the way to the end. And usually this is a domain that is the length of the curve. So if you want to evaluate it at 0, it's going to be this endpoint. And if you evaluate it at the end of the domain, or the full length of the curve, it's going to be this point. So if you want to evaluate in the center, it's going to be half of the distance, half of the length of the domain. So the domain is from 0 to the length. And we can actually get that value from this curve. All right, so let's go ahead and import the RhinoScript syntax. And then let's get the curve is rs.getObject. Select curve. Set it to 4 to filter by 4, because that will return only a curve, which is what we want. If it's not, you can actually also do a check for rhino.isCurve to see if it's a curve or not, but we're not going to do that here. What we want to do is actually find out what is the domain of this curve. So we're going to store it in a value called domain, and we do rs.curve evaluate, curve domain, and we give it the value of our curve. You can see the help down at the bottom. It asks for the curve ID, or the GUID. You can also have a segment in case it's a polyline or a polycurve and there's multiple curves associated with it. You can give it the segment ID. In this case, we have one continuous curve by itself. So let's just print that domain and see what we have. All right. When we click it, we can get a value. Here we see 0 to 336.24 units, and that is the domain. So if we were to evaluate the curve at 0, it would be the first point, and evaluate the curve at 336.24, it would be at the end of the curve. What we want to do is we want to create a point called t that equals the domain, and remember the domain is a list, so we should either choose the first or the second value. And really we should do maybe something like this. So we actually take the length, the longest number, the 1, minus the shorter number, the 0 value of the domain, so that it subtracts, because sometimes actually the domain does not start with 0. That's not always the case. Usually it's the case that it does start with 0. And then let's say just the halfway point. So if we divide by 2.0, all right, or we could multiply by 0.5, same difference. Now let's create a point by evaluating the curve, CRV, at the parameter t that we just created. That's going to give us a point, and we can print it out. And it gives us that point, x, y, and z. And then along with that, we can go ahead and say rs.addPoint and actually create a point at the location PNT, the array location. All right. And then we look here, and we can see that there's a point created in the center, at the middle of the center of the domain. That's how you evaluate a curve.